Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. OG here. So, before we get into this video, I want to give you a little background, okay? Early this morning, like several hours ago, I decided to make this video. That's where you're getting the footage from. And basically, it was going to cover exactly what I am doing to decide which of these football games to cover going forward. Because we're getting to the point where in less than 2 months, we're going to have a new iteration of FC, right? We're going to have FC 26. We're going to have a new iteration of eFootball, which will be titled, as we think, eFootball 26. And then we will have maybe or maybe not a new version of UFL. Now, FC 26, you will literally physically have to buy, or you can get the downloaded version. Most likely people will on their PlayStation, Xbox, PC, whatever. But then UFL and eFootball, they are a free download. You just essentially get the update of the game, titled, like we said, eFootball 26, or whatever the UFL update's called. Usually it's just update 5.12345, whatever. Okay? Now, the reason why I have to make this decision, it's the same with many players around the world, and I'll tie it to real life sports. A lot of us grow up playing several different sports, but as we get older, we finally realize, like, if we want to be the best of the best at any of these sports, we have to put all of our time into it. And when we play several different sports, we take away, the ability to get to the very top of any given sport because we're not training as much as others. We're not playing as much as others, right? And so eventually we have to make that tough decision and focus on one sport no matter how much we love other ones. It's the same with these different football games because while it's the same sport, there are different nuances. There's certain muscle memory that goes into playing one of these games as opposed to 2 and 3, right? And for me as a competitor, I need to try to be the very best. Not only that, but with the content I want to provide for those who are continuing to climb like me, who have that drive, I can't really get into it and provide that super sharp, super detailed content for each game if I'm not myself playing at the highest level and fully being focused on that one game. So up to this point, I know that I've helped a lot of people out, but more on a basic level in, eFootball, UFL, and FC 25. I want to go past that though. But the reason why I've been going from game to game to game to game is because all three of these games have great parts to them that I love and that I could play all day long. And all three of these games have parts that I absolutely hate and that will lead me and that do lead me and many others to leave the game or at least take a long break, right? And so with that being said, it just makes the decision that much harder. That's why I haven't fully focused on one game yet. I started getting to that or leaning in that direction, and then of course the nonsense would come up and it's like, you know what? This game isn't really worth it. So what I did for this video is play one game each in eFootball, UFL, and in FC 25. I then broke down within the menus exactly what you get rewards-wise, what you get modes-wise, opponents-wise, all of that. Just all the information I have so far for each game. And hopefully, with you being able to watch what was a whole game, I cut it down to a half of each game, as well as get kind of that Cliff Notes version of what to expect from the game. Maybe there's some things you didn't think about. Maybe there's some things that you needed your memory refreshed on, but essentially I want to add my train of thought and how I'm picking these games to kind of what you're doing to decide what game or games to cover. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with UFL. Now, for those of you who haven't followed my channel since the beginning, which feels like ages ago, however, it was only like months ago. We're talking a little over a half of a year tops. But for those of you who don't know, I started my channel just with UFL. No FC, no eFootball. And that was because it was essentially perfect timing for a UFL release, right? FC was in shambles, and for me and many others, eFootball was written off just based on when they initially came to PS5, how poorly the release was. So many bugs, so much nonsense, but we'll get into that during the eFootball part. Let's talk about UFL and what it looked like at its release, which was before I started my channel, right? I go in, I start playing the game, and I loved it. Was it a polished game? No. But It was a game that was wide open. You could play with any formation, any tactical setup at a time when FC was very driven by the one meta formation at all times that you had to play if you wanted to compete with the best players, right? You couldn't play a variety of setups because of how the game was, organized, let's call it. And that was very frustrating because that's not how football is. On top of that, the ways to score, everything was very limited. The defense was all clustered AI nonsense, and in UFL, it was pretty much full manual defense. You could score in several different ways, right? And while there were some overpowered mechanics such as the lofted over the top through ball to your striker, you still, with skill, could defend stuff like that. For instance, controlling your center back and manually pulling them back early to try to avoid that over the top through ball. So, what was the best part? UFL was skill based, right? Your football knowledge and your ability to perform on the sticks would translate to success. Hence why I started my channel, because I was having success due to this wide open gameplay that had to do with skill and had to do with your ability to play football on the sticks, but I noticed others were struggling and I knew I could help others climb. Very similar to why I started coaching real life football, because I wanted to give back and help players reach the level or surpass the level that I got to, right? It is extremely similar, and people, or players I should say, on the sticks don't realize just how much coaches and seeing things from a different perspective can help you improve. So I started my channel, and I was extremely shocked at how fast I started growing, only covering UFL. Now, I was so new to content creation that if you go back and see my earliest videos, you'll see how raw I was, but you'll also see that I had a completely different mindset, right? Because UFL was newer, because I didn't know they were over 8 years in production, I gave them a lot of benefits of the doubt, let's say, and I allowed a lot of what would have been red flags to just get a pass, right? I didn't bring them up. I stayed positive. I stayed backing strikers and whatever they were doing until the first update and beyond. And this is because leading up to that point, some of the cracks started showing, and then their update from the first one on started a terrible pattern where instead of fixing the things that they set out to fix, instead of being as transparent as they were from the start, they started adding in things that were broken. Like all of a sudden, the patch would come instead of fixing something, or maybe it did fix that one thing, but it broke several others. Like, next thing you know, the L1 triangle across the field long pass, which essentially bypassed your entire buildup. It allowed you to play this super long 80-yard rocket from like the corner of your box to the corner, your corner of your defensive box to the corner of your attacking box. Then all you would do is press L1 square, a lob cross to one of your bigger strikers, who would then dunk on the keeper and head it in. It was like the same animation every time, and that was now the main way / like the only way that anybody was playing. The football, just like that, which that's a snap of my fingers, just like that, the football was gone. The wide open, skill-based gameplay, gone. But it was the first big update. I wanted to give them, by them I mean strikers, the benefit of the doubt, so I continued playing. I reached as high as number 10 in the world. The number 1 player in the world, which was in a more football-dominated region, right, South America, actually came on and told me thank you for giving him the assistance needed. He was using my tactics. He's actually still part of the channel, just became a member now, while he's moved on to eFootball, which tells you everything you need to know about UFL. But a lot of great relationships were started, and a lot of great players started here in UFL and tried to give it all the chances in the world to succeed. And strikers just proved over and over again that they were incompetent, that they were shady. They started doing things just as bad or worse than both Konami and EA Sports as far as trying to take the player base's money. Like I said, all that transparency that they started with started disappearing, and now what you have is a game left in shambles. Now, we could go into detail about all of the updates after this that continued adding more and more glitches where strikers would just continue to leave those glitches, sometimes fixing things, many times making things worse. many times leaving some of the glitches to the point where there's still day one glitches that ruin the game that are still left in, which eventually we realize just shows that as a development company, they don't have the ability, right? They don't have the skill, if you will, to fix the coding, to fix issues, whatever it is. I'm not a tech guy, I don't know the technical terms, but essentially they just kept making the game worse and worse. They kept going in terrible directions. For instance, that manual defense turned to AI defense, right? The shooting went from wide open, being able to score in many different ways, to certain broken ways that you could score. You started being able to lock up the defense so that players that didn't have enough skill to create chances through proper build-up could now create chances and get openings by essentially using stuff that was broken, not even football related. And the game is still at that point. And eventually what it seems pretty obvious is that strikers realize, well, we have a broken game. We obviously failed, but we still have these low skill, low level players that are willing to spend money, buy all these skins, buy kits and all this stuff because they're actually winning when they clearly can't win in the other football games. So we'll leave this broken stuff in. We'll give up on actually making a good game, give up on any new players, any skilled players, and just try to milk all these players until we get a certain amount of money. And then clearly they're going to close up shop because there's enough of these low-level players with how the game is to gain some money back, to recoup, if you will, just like failing businesses do, which, make no mistake about it, Strikers is a business, right? The game of UFL, it is a business. So they've all but shown their hand that they're just trying to recoup all the money they can from the current low-level players that don't mind playing and winning with glitches. And then eventually they'll close up shop because while there's enough players to recoup money that they spent to essentially create what they've created so far, right? There's not enough players to have a longevity with the game. Eventually they're going to have to create more content. Eventually they're going to have to come up with a game plan to keep players interested. They would have already had to come up with a game plan to keep adding players because they're still a newer game, and they've done none of that. So once that recoup process is done and it starts to get to the point where they'll lose money again, trying to reinvest to make the game better, that's when they close up shop. Again, this isn't a new thing. This is something that all failing businesses do. This is something that other new video games and their development companies have done. So do I hope this doesn't happen? Of course I do, because more football games is good for all of the player base. Even if you don't play all the games, the competition keeps each development company providing their best work, right? Because they're always, at fear that they'll lose players to the other games. And at the end of the day, it's about making money. Losing players loses money. So I hope that I'm wrong. I hope this game stays forever. I hope that it turns around and turns into the best game, right? But I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. I'm just telling you some of what I've heard. I don't have actual proof, right? I have some very good alleged evidence, but not enough to give you, yes, this game's definitely going under, quit right now. So you just have to take the information you get with a grain of salt and decide if it's worth it to you to invest your time, if it's worth it to you to invest your time and money into this game. For me, I've decided it is not. A game that is in shambles, a lack of modes, lack of depth, right? A lack of good rewards. I give it a D-. And there are two reasons why I don't give it an F. One, it's a very small part of it, is that they have great customization, a great partnership with Adidas that provided a lot of great exclusive, customization, stadium, stuff like that. They did a good job there. But the other bigger part is because the game does take skill, it's just not football skill. So you can absolutely have fun if you don't care about football. However, many of us do care and want to play football, which is where the problems start with this game right here. A game that historically has been about the realest football on the sticks. And somehow we've gone in the complete opposite direction in the current state of eFootball. But first, let me give you some quick backstory on my history with eFootball. When it first came out on the PS5, myself, just like many others, pretty much wrote off the game because there were so many glitches. They rushed the release, and it took the the Marlon Anthony documentary on the history of PES for me to understand that this was a calling card for Konami. Rush the release on the new console and give the game pretty much a bad first impression for many of the players, even though underneath that bad first impression, at the core of the game was actual good football, right? Sometimes they released absolute gems like the 1999 ISS Pro Evolution, which was my first run with realistic football, my first run with the Master League that, again, I didn't even know until I watched that Marlon Anthony PES history and kind of got a jog of my memories, right? Went down memory lane, if you will. But the bottom line is this. Myself, as well as many other players around the world, have great memories with this game, and PES, as many of us call it, right? Or Winning 11 or ISS, whatever name, same game. It was a badge of honor to play this instead of FIFA because playing PES or whatever the title was called that you played meant that you knew football. You had skill because that's what these games were all about. They had that tie to realism that FIFA never had. FIFA was always more arcade. And so the fact that you now have a feature called Smart Assist where the AI makes decisions for you in many other areas, the defensive area, whatever passing level you use. I mean, so many areas, no dynamic shooting. It's just a game that essentially, as a commenter said earlier on stream, where you're holding a controller like you're, controlling things in the game, but really you're just watching a simulation. You're just watching the AI play, right? I mean, if you shoot near post and the AI says, nope, we're going far post. If you pass left and the AI says, nope, we're going to pass right. If you play a through ball and the AI says, nope, we're going to play to feet, or we're going to play in the air, or whatever, they are in control. They are making the most important decisions. So you can't call it actual PvP anymore. The fact that you can use this feature at any level, and even when the feature is off, the AI is already out of control, but yet they still added something like Smart Assist, it shows a couple things. One, it shows that the game is in a terrible state, especially compared to the history of the game and what it meant to play PES, right? Being a skilled footballer, being a realistic player that wants the game to showcase your knowledge and your skill and your expertise. A game like that definitely does not need a feature like Smart Assist. So it also shows that Konami, however they came up with the information, has decided that they have a extremely low skilled player base that needs assistance. Because they took the core of their game, which does tie to PES and stays true to the roots, very real way to the players, passing, shooting, and then they added a ton of nonsense over it, essentially putting training wheels on training wheels on training wheels on the game to the point where you're not even really doing anything, right? It takes so much away from the satisfaction that you can barely get that feel of the historic PES, right? It's still there, and it's still very powerful enough to draw players like me in to still give the game a chance. But I will tell you that what I'm talking about, on top of the fact that it's outrageous to get the legendary players, superstars, whether it's Showtime, Big Time, Epic cards, it's a ridiculous ripoff to get those players, right? But there's a flip side to that, which is they do their players, especially their legends, way better than FC, right? FC misses the mark so bad on their what they call icons and heroes. So at least you're getting ripped off, but at least you are getting something good as far as those players. But the problem is there is a severe lack in modes to play. There's a severe lack in rewards that matter. And so when you add that to all of the assistance, the AI assistance that's taken away from the game, it makes it very easy to say, forget this game, right? The only reason I would say it's still in contention, I would say that's twofold. One is because UFL crashed and burned, and there's a lot of players that have just totally decided nope to EA Sports FC, and so they gave UFL a chance. But once UFL burned, boom, now they're back to just eFootball. So that allowed Konami to keep some players that they otherwise wouldn't. And the other reason is because there are certain players that, whether they'll admit it or not, love the fact that they have almost a handicap. They would rather win, which is the problem with players nowadays, right? I'm going to sound like an old head, but it is. They would rather win by any cost, even if it means not playing football themselves, as opposed to putting in the work to get better, as opposed to getting their butts kicked, but at least they played. At least they were in control. At least their skill got them their result instead of the AI getting them their result. Instead of knowing that they would have got their butt kicked, but the smart assist helped them or all of the other assistants helped them. That is insane, but that's why Konami's put all this stuff in there. So, there is a big presentation coming as part of the whole 30th anniversary for Konami. Now, what we don't know, unless there's something that you guys can tell me that I haven't heard, but as far as I know, we don't know if they're going to do a full breakdown like FC26 did with their initial trailer and like the notes, or if they're just going to, just so we watch the 30th anniversary presentation, give us a little tidbit of what to expect. Like, hey guys, we're adding in, tournament mode, stay tuned for more, and then they move on to something else? Or is it going to be a full-on detailed breakdown at this presentation like they did for the big update where they did some cool stuff, but they famously announced Smart Assist is now in every mode, not just events? Because I'll never forget hearing that, because I just recently had even discovered like what Smart Assist was and was losing my mind, and within a few days I hear now you can use it in every mode, right? It was around that time that I was like, see you later. I think I even gave UFL another chance. That's how bad finding that out was, that they were going to have Smart Assist in divisions and events like they already had. And it's just a joke. So the first thing that I hope to hear is we made a mistake. Smart Assist is only in like divisions 10, 9, and 8. Or even better would be we made a mistake. Smart Assist is literally getting burnt to this crisp, never to come back. That would be great news, but not realistic. On top of that, more modes, more rewards. If it's just, hey, we're bringing in Rooney, Zidane, Ronaldo, whoever, it doesn't matter who they bring in, because we already have great players, and because a lot of those players, right, have already been in FC. That's nothing new to football gamers in general. It will be new to eFootballers, but football gamers in general, to play eFootball, right, you need more to do. You need more modes, and you need better rewards, right? A big part of these modes is team building, is playing for something. And if you give a bunch of meaningless rewards, if you give a bunch of modes that you can finish in like 30 minutes and then you're done outside of just divisions over and over and over and over, the game's going to get boring fast. It's going to get boring just putting money in, getting great players, putting money in, getting great players, putting money in, getting great players, and not really getting to use them. And when you do use them, by the way, remember, if Smart Assist for some reason isn't removed, that's why it's the A1 thing that has to be addressed. If it's not removed among the other AI stuff that's ruining like the player's actual control, then even when you do get to play, it's not nearly as rewarding. So, what is the conclusion for me? eFootball and my future with this game, just like I know many of you are waiting kind of on the same type of thing, is largely based on what happens with Konami's big announcements Monday, or if they just give us a tidbit and delay it, whenever their big announcements are on the eFootball 26 update. What will change for that game, right? If they knock it out of the park and change enough, kind of like what I've been talking about, we're in there. Fully supportive and ready to play some eFootball, and I wish that would happen. Just like I said with UFL, I want these games to be the best they can be. The difference is for eFootball, if we get that great news, I'll actually be covering the game. Even if it means trying to figure out how to cover both FC and eFootball, right? So, time will tell. Hopefully Monday we get all the details and we don't have to, get a tidbit and wait even further, but we shall see. So, that means eFootball's up in the air, and it leaves us with just FC26, which for me has the longest background as far as how long I've played, but a little bit more of a complicated situation with how I will continue with this game going forward. So, quick backstory for, again, those who haven't followed the channel from the beginning, or at least from when I started covering FC, as far as the content creator goes. This game has been what I identified with as a football gamer, if you will, right? Even though, again, with Marlon Anthony's History of PES, when I started rehashing that, doing my own spin-off of that amazing documentary, I realized I pretty much was a PES player too. It's just growing up, you don't really care about the titles and which game it is, whether it's EA Sports or Konami. You just want to play the best football game. That was when it was pure and the most fun. And while I did play both competitively, right, I did start with EA Sports' FC at the time. It was FIFA, and it was in 2022, right? To be exact, it's 2021 going into 22 with FIFA 22, right? So I had 22 and 23. Then we went into FC 24 and 25, and now we're going into FC 26. I left the game literally mid FC Pro event because the game was just complete trash. This was at the time when it was obviously pre-major patch for FC 25. The big one-time 50-yard power shots became huge. The defense was just a joke. It was total park the bus, don't touch your defenders and you'll get rewarded. And it just wasn't worth it anymore. So I left knowing UFL was coming. I was very intrigued with what I saw from UFL, and that's pretty much how UFL became the game I started my channel around and not FC. Fast forward, UFL starts taking wrong turns. FC makes an unprecedented update. I should say EA Sports makes an unprecedented update to FC 25. I go ahead and give it a shot, and boom, I could see the improvements right away. Now, in true EA Sports fashion, the game started taking a dip again about a month, 2 months in, where I totally took my team from a couple months behind the power curve to a top team again. And next thing you know, the game's starting to go in a bad direction. So I say, nope, not getting discouraged, disappointed again. And it was around that time where I didn't only cover UFL and give them another chance, but I also gave eFootball a chance. There were several members that had played eFootball and said you got to look at it from a different perspective. It's totally different from FIFA/FC, and they were totally right. So this isn't the eFootball part of the video. We won't go into that. But at that point, I started covering all three games, and it was because all three had, like I said earlier, great things about them and terrible things about them. For FC, they of course have so many modes, so much content. You can never argue about that. A+ in both of those areas. Control of the game, especially when you look at it compared to eFootball, A+ in that area. The fact that you can make your own runs, come to, go on runs in any direction. You can player lock. You have precision shooting, green time shooting, all of it, right? The tactics aren't as detailed. I like that, better in eFootball, as well as the weight of the players, the weight of the passing in shooting. It's definitely more arcade-like in FC. I don't like that. But overall, gameplay-wise, you would have to give it to FC as far as being the very best game. So when you look at content, game modes, and like I said, just because of the control you have, because there's no smart assist, no AI choosing things for you when you don't want them to, FC is easily the best game. However, they have one major issue, which finally EA Sports addressed, and that is the inconsistent gameplay, where you go to shoot and there's terrible delay. You go to dribble and your players are just stuck, right? For years we've known this existed, but for years EA Sports ignored it. Many players talked about it, including, thank goodness, Anders Fergang, the literal once-in-a-generation #1 player in the world. I say thank goodness because he was the one for me that showed like there was proof at the highest level that this game sometimes makes it to where the most skilled players don't win. Now, what we don't know yet, at least what they haven't talked about yet, is how the players themselves, these rat losers, how they affect that inconsistent gameplay. We know that for the first time in years, which Inception breaks down pretty well. You can look up that video where he goes over the trailer and sort of the notes too. He talks about, while he doesn't have much hope, right, because that's just Inception, I get it with EA Sports in this game. It's hard to give them credit or have hope with them with all the failures they've had. But he did say he gives them more hope than he has, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, because they finally talked about this stuff that they haven't in a long time. They admitted things that they haven't admitted, right? So when Inception says he has a little bit of hope, that gives me a lot of hope. And the reason why it's such a big deal is, for me, it's not the only area, but I'd say like 95% of the reason why I'm on the fence about playing this game going forward. Why is that? Well, You're seeing a little bit of it on this game right here. I mean, this nonsense that you just saw. Players that are taking advantage of the inconsistent gameplay. You'll go into a game, you'll beat someone 5-0. The next game, the opponent is even worse than the opponent you beat 5-0, but they'll beat you 1-0. Or you have to play the best game of your life and sort of go in UFL mode where you're using skill but not actual football skill to win, because when you go to shoot, you have a 3-second delay and they have an instant shot. When you go to pass, you have a 3-second delay, they have an instant pass. Right? You have players that are turning into you, running into your defender as a skill because they know your defender and the tackle you try to, command into play is delayed, right? So it's not going to go off. They can turn into you and just run by you like you're a ghost. And so it's the most frustrating thing in the world, to the point where that is the number one reason several times that I've went back to UFL and to eFootball, because it gets that bad. It takes you into that dark of a place. And for those of you who say, like, oh, I just play for fun, who cares? Or, what's the big deal? It's a game, man. What do you mean a dark place? It kind of shows me your weak mindset, and I'll explain what I mean. People will say that I just play for fun. Why do you care so much? But then you look at the hours, and you'll see that I play less hours than a lot of these guys. You're talking like, let's say I'm at $300, they'll be at like $900, $1,000. And the fact that they can say something like, who cares, man? It's just a game. It shows that they don't realize how valuable their time is, right? Every day that we spend playing, every hour that we spend playing matters, because our time matters, because we matter, because our opponents matter, right? If you're going to do something, it's worth doing right. If you're going to put that much time into something, then it's worth caring about, right? I mean, that is such a loser mindset to say you're going to put 1,000 hours in something, but who cares? No, it's just 1,000 hours, no big deal. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, that goes against logic. It goes against common sense. 1,000 hours, 800 hours, 200 hours, 100, 80, 50, it doesn't matter. You put time into something, it matters. Not to mention, it's the integrity of competition. It's the integrity of the beautiful game, right? The sport that earned the name the beautiful game, and actually playing that sport. Give me a break on trying to explain to anybody that it's worth it to cheat, to cut corners, to do anything but play football with skill for the sake of what? Winning. So you can say you beat someone even though you know you're worse than them, even though you know you didn't play football at all. That's a complete joke, but unfortunately there's a ton of losers like that, and they are in every game, right? And I do like the fact that in FC you can actually control the outcome more with the manual runs, player lock, things like that. You can control it a lot more than like eFootball where the AI is in the driver's seat. You can control it a lot more than UFL where you have to embrace these glitches and sort of learn to work around them as a skill, which I hate, right? So in that sense, I love the fact that you have control in FC, but again, when you're dominating and you can do nothing about that 3-second delay on your shots, on your tackles, that you can't do anything about players running into your defender knowing that you can't tackle them and they just move in and score on you, right? It is the most frustrating thing in the world, and so that's where FC is in limbo. So, the unique situation with FC that UFL and eFootball doesn't have is that we have to pay up to $100, which is what I would be paying to get the Ultimate Edition, beforehand, right? We can't download the game for free, try it out, and see if, Konami was telling the truth or not about how good the updates were, if Strikers was telling the truth or not about the updates with UFL. We have to spend $100, try the game, and gamble on if EA Sports was telling us the truth about how good these updates were, right? I'm leaning towards they have done something right with not only the player base feedback inspired, overhaul of FC 26 from FC 25, but also because they finally addressed the inconsistent gameplay, right? They weren't as direct as we all wish they could have been in that area, but they did address it, which means they know players are going to hone in on it and see and call their bluff. And so for me, I'd like to think, especially because they don't want to lose the amount of money they lost in FC 25, they don't want to have those results again, losing players. having players pissed off, speaking bad about the product, which is bad publicity to get new players to get the money they want. So I would like to think that they're smart enough, rich enough, big enough. They didn't get there by making dumb decisions like bringing something up that many players are sensitive about, that have chased many players away. They wouldn't be dumb enough to bring that up if they truly weren't making changes to make the inconsistent gameplay better. However, like I said, it still is a gamble. You don't know until after you pay the money, whether it's a $100 Ultimate Edition or whatever edition. You won't know until you pay the money and you play the game. Now, you could wait a little while and wait for a review, but there's so many things going on, so many things to review. I know I would give you a notification. However, that FOMO will be huge, right? When everyone's starting to play the game, they're on the companion app, they're starting to build their teams. I'm releasing all these videos on how to stay ahead of the curve, and you're sitting there just with nothing. Just, is the game good? Is the game bad? Is it worth it? Is it worth it to spend? It's going to be hard to do. So for me, I'm about 99% sure I'm pre-ordering the game. Might even do it today. But for me, the only holdup is that I'm trying my hardest to wait for Konami's announcement, whether it's on Monday, which I hope it is, or they give us a little tidbit and it's a future date they give us where they give us, all the big updates for eFootball 26. Because if it's big enough, I may go strictly to eFootball 26. That still is a possibility. Or at the very least, which this would still require me to pre-order the Ultimate Edition, I may try to cover both eFootball and FC26, at least for the start of the new iterations. Only time will tell, and a lot of it is based on nothing else besides what Konami does, as far as providing improvements, hopefully, to eFootball 26. So with that being said, when this screen pops up and it's FC26, whatever the new eFootball 26 cover is, whatever the new, if there is any, UFL cover it is, which game will I be playing, and which game or games will you be playing? For me right now, here is the order. FC26, followed by eFootball in close second, still with a big question mark over it, and a big X over UFL. And I'll even say a small question mark next to FC26, just based on, with a big arrow pointing to, eFootball saying update notes and another question mark. Very confusing maybe, but if you followed what I said, you get exactly what I mean. If not, you'll just have to stay tuned. But that is my breakdown of all three games. Hopefully that helped you out, and I cannot wait to continue our journey together, playing football, trying to get the best out of these games, making memories along the way, adding more and more great football minds to our incredible Discord community, which if you haven't joined, you should join. The link is in the YouTube bio. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to like any videos and subscribe to my YouTube. If you don't mind, you could follow me also on Twitch and on Kick. I stream on both of those as well as YouTube. You can look at any stream cover page and see my Kick and Twitch ID or whatever the heck it's called. And I will see you on the next one. Peace out.